It was January, and I had rented a winter cabin by an ice fishing lake. It was a small, bare-bones cabin with only the essentials, perfect for people like me who enjoyed fishing. I usually brought a friend along, but sometimes I went alone and never had any issues. I planned a 3-day stay with no real plans other than fishing. On the first day, I set up my things in the cabin, made myself at home, brewed some hot coffee, and relaxed by the fireplace. The cabin was a single room with the bed, fireplace, and everything else in one area. I fell asleep early and woke up at 7 a.m. to go out to the lake. It was a 10-minute walk from the cabin down a snow-covered path through the forest. Once I reached the lake, I found a good spot, drilled into the ice, and started fishing. I find fishing to be very stress-relieving, though many people find it boring. I stayed on the lake for several hours before packing up as the snow started to pick up and the wind grew heavier. As I walked back along the path, I noticed a set of footprints in the snow alongside mine from earlier. They went up to the edge of the lake and then turned back toward the cabin. Feeling uneasy that someone had been behind me, possibly watching me, I followed the prints. They mostly followed the path back to the cabin, but veered off into the woods. Confused and slightly nervous, I returned to the cabin and warmed up by the fireplace. There was nothing else around for miles, so it was odd for anyone to be out here, especially in winter. I made food and stayed in the cabin for the rest of the night, keeping the fireplace running and mostly reading. About an hour after sunset, I heard movement outside. The light crunching in the snow sounded like someone walking. I moved to the window and saw a figure by the trees, heading toward the path. They were wearing thick clothing, making it hard to identify them. They turned and started coming toward the cabin. I ducked my head down, listening to the footsteps getting closer until they were right up against the wall. The person peered inside the cabin through the window, their shadow moving around. I tilted my head up and saw their eyes staring back at me. Startled, I jumped away from the window as the person tried to lift it open. I grabbed a nearby knife, but after a few more attempts, the person ran off. I watched them disappear into the snowy woods in the same direction they had come from. I packed up quickly and left the area, fearing what might have happened if I stayed. I don't know who they were or what they wanted, but they knew I was there and tried to break in. I was lucky to get out unharmed, but I feel that night was dangerously close to being my last. Last year, my roommate moved out of the house we had been renting together for the past 4 years. By then, both of us had gotten better jobs and were getting paid more, and the house we had wasn't the best. So, it was only a matter of time before one of us moved out to get our own place. After he moved, I was able to use more of the space in the house and decided to stay there for another year or two. This happened during early December, when our area was experiencing a week of severe snowstorms. The office I worked at allowed us to work from home for a few days if we wanted to. Naturally, I chose to take the offer. I used my old roommate's bedroom as an office and worked throughout the day. At one point, there was a knock at the front door. I left the room and checked who it was. There was a man on the porch in a heavy winter jacket. He didn't seem to be a worker or delivery person, just some regular guy. I opened the door, feeling a rush of snow and wind. "How can I help you?" I asked. The man smiled and apologized for interrupting my day. He explained that his car got stuck in the snow right next to my house, and he didn't have a phone on him, so he asked if he could borrow mine. Skeptical, I told him to give me a minute and closed the door. I went to the other side of the house and looked out the window at the road. There was a small SUV that had slid into the curb and gotten stuck in the snowbank. Feeling more confident that he was telling the truth, I grabbed a jacket, put on some shoes, and went back to the front door. I stood on the porch with him as he used my phone to call his brother. I stayed close, ready to chase after him if needed. After a quick call, the man handed my phone back, thanked me, and walked away. I went inside, checked the window, and saw the man getting into his car. Thinking everything was settled, I returned to my office and resumed working. Around 7, I felt like I had done enough for the day and took the rest of the night off. Remembering the man and his car, I checked on it again. To my surprise, the car was still there and I could see the man moving around inside. But it had been almost 3 hours, which made me wonder why he was still there. Maybe he was waiting for his brother to get off work. I didn't know. I made dinner and watched TV, staying up until about 9:30 before going upstairs to shower and get ready for bed. A few minutes into my shower, there was an abrupt and sudden banging on the front door. The noise was loud and harsh, completely startling me. The banging was so intense that it shook the walls, and I could hear it throughout the house. Whoever it was, they were hitting the door non-stop and aggressively shaking the handle. In a state of panic, I quickly got dressed and left my room. As I walked down the hallway, the noise stopped, leaving an eerie silence. I cautiously walked downstairs to the front door. No one was there. I ran to the window and saw that the car was still there, but the man was not inside it. Unsure of what to do, I called the police. When they arrived, they noticed multiple sets of shoe prints in the snow, though they were partially covered by the storm. They took the license plate of the car and found a picture of the owner. It appeared to be the same man I had helped. In the following days, the police waited for him to turn up, but he never did. It's disturbing to think about what could have happened that night. Was it the same man desperately trying to get in, or someone else with malicious intent? Some believe the man was running from someone and seeking help, but what happened afterward remains a mystery. In January 2020, when I was 18, I signed up for DoorDash during winter break because some of my friends were also doing it. I didn't need the money, as I was still in high school and living with my parents, but it was something to do, and earning a couple of $100 a week was nice. My first few nights went smoothly. I got the hang of it after a few orders, and it became routine. During my second week, I started working more, excited about making money for the first time. My friends mentioned that bad weather days often meant more earnings, so when it started snowing one night, I decided to work. For the first hour, I was FaceTiming a friend who was also driving around, but he went home around 8. It was a Saturday, so I could stay out late. By 10, I was getting bored, but took one more order. I drove to the neighborhood, struggling to see house numbers in the snow. Eventually, I found the right address, a typical 2-story suburban home still decorated with Christmas lights. I parked, put my hazards on, and walked up the driveway, checking the bag. The front door was ajar, which was strange considering the cold and snow. I figured it was so I could leave the bag inside. As I approached, I heard a woman's voice from inside, asking if I was the delivery person. She sounded young, maybe in her early 20s. "Yeah, I put it right here in your doorway," I replied. She told me to push the door open and bring the bag to her. It felt strange, but I pushed the door open to see where she was. Down a long hallway, I saw her shadow on the wall, standing around the corner. "Where do you want me to bring it?" I asked. After a long pause, she leaned halfway around the corner, gesturing for me to come in. As she disappeared, I realized the shadow on the wall hadn't moved with her. Someone else was standing there. Blood rushed through me, and I quietly placed the bag down, stepping back before rushing to my car. As I drove away, I glanced back and saw a large man in the front window, watching me leave. I stopped at a nearby gas station to catch my breath and rethink what had happened. It was clear this was some kind of setup. I reported it to the police, but they couldn't do much with just my account. When they questioned the woman, she denied anyone else was there and refused to let the police search the house. What the woman and man intended to do remains unknown.